Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another show where I answer your repair questions. These repair questions are taken from the Google Plus event that you may be watching right now. One thing, if you're watching the YouTube video, I can't see those comments, so I won't be answering YouTube comments. So if you're posting your questions to the YouTube video, I apologize. I'm not going to be answering those. Also, if you post your question to this event after the event is already over, I won't be answering those questions either. I know, I'm telling you all the things I'm not doing as far as answering your questions. But I do have a solution for you, and that is to head over to EricTheCarGuy.com 24/7, 365. It's there available to you as a resource. There's videos, articles, a forum, all kinds of useful repair information to help you with any issues if you have them. Also, if you missed tonight's event, I apologize for that, but the next event will be on July 16th. And lastly, there will be a bunch of links and additional information in the description shortly after I wrap up the video. I'll put a whole bunch of stuff down there, resources that you can use, things that were discussed in the video, and some other possibly useful tools for you should you have automotive questions. But it's only a half-hour show, and I like to try and answer as many of these questions as possible. So I'm just going to get right in. All right, now that we've got that part out of the way, we have Larry Brown. My belt on my 93 Chevy Blazer feels like it gets stuck or is being pulled over, a pull that gets stuck. This happens when my AC is on, I think. I changed my AC. Can I do it, Muse, or should I take it to a shop? Myself, or should I take it to a shop? What I'm gathering from what I'm seeing in your question is you appear to have an issue with belt alignment. Perhaps the serpentine belt isn't on there. You state that when the AC is on, it's possible that that's what causes the belt to jump and come off, that type of thing. The AC does put an additional load on the belt, but one of the things I would look for in this, and I've actually made a video about this, is the alignment of the pulleys, particularly the automatic tensioner that I believe is on that vehicle, to make sure that that's not bouncing around, or perhaps like maybe the bearing has gone inside of it, so it might be listing to one side or the other, and if that's the case, it will cause the belt to walk. And then if you put the additional load of the AC on the engine, that will put more of a load on the belt, and that may cause the belt to walk off. So you might want to check the alignment of not just the AC pulley, but all the pulleys. In particular, I would pay close attention to the idler pulley and the automatic tensioner to make sure that those things are positioned correctly and they don't have any bad bearings. Maybe go so far as to remove the belt itself. I have a video on serpentine belt removal that you might find helpful. So as far as whether or not you can do it yourself, just really depends on your motivation and your tools and your time and how much you want to invest in this time-wise. So serpentine belts normally aren't that much of a challenge, particularly on pickup trucks. They're usually a little bit easier to get to, except for on that one I believe you have a clutch fan that you have to work around. But to check the pulleys and things, you could just take the belt off, and then, like I say, just go around each one of the pulleys and feel them for looseness and make sure that their alignment is correct. And if you find one loose, correct that issue, replace that part, and then reinstall the belt, possibly a new belt at this point. You're already in there, and see if you still have that issue. So that's how I would pursue that one. Let's see, Howard. Let's see, no. That's not an auto repair question. Here's a really good one. Matt Bono, does ATF expire? My power steering fluid takes Valvoline Max Life ATF. I bought it a year ago, and it's been sitting in my car since then. Never been open. On a similar note, what about brake fluid? I had a little bit left over the last time I bled the system. Is it safe to finish that last bit off on another car? That has been sitting in my garage also about a year. Thanks in advance. Well, Matt, that's an excellent question, and one I'm more prepared to answer. Wasn't that long ago, actually about a couple weeks ago, I sat down with some of the engineers, well, an engineer and a person that handles customer questions at Valvoline, and I learned quite a bit about oils and ATF in the time that I was there. So to answer your question, the ATF is probably fine. There really is no expiration date on them. However, if it's been in your car, it'll probably be okay. But one of the things they said was is sometimes if it sits for a long period of time, the additives that are in the oil might settle out. And if that's the case, you might want to shake the bottle before you use it. Given that it's been in your car, it's probably been moved around quite a bit. So you should be, technically, you should be fine with the ATF. Now, brake fluid might be a different story, and that has a lot to do with how it's been stored. Brake fluid is what's called hygroscopic, meaning that it absorbs moisture. As a result, its boiling point is lowered, and it's not as effective as it was initially. So depending upon how it was stored, if it's also stored in your vehicle, there might be more issues with this. In a temperature-controlled garage, heated garage, it might be less of an issue. And the reason I say that is because any condensation that might happen inside that bottle as a result of the air that was in there could affect that. So let's put it this way: if you had brake fluid that was sealed and like had that little plastic seal or whatever it is on the top and had been sitting around for a year, I wouldn't worry about that. But brake fluid that has been opened and sitting around for a year would probably be less effective than brake fluid that was new. The ATF, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily suffer that same fate. So very good question. I would say ATF, you're fine. Brake fluid, maybe. That answers that question. Let's see. Carlos Nunez. Hey, Eric, I have a 1999 Accord 4-cylinder. I want to replace my splash guard on the front knuckle due to extreme rusting. I just wanted to know, how would I go about replacing it? Does the whole knuckle have to come off? Please keep in mind it has extreme rust. Thanks and stay dirty. P.S. You are one of the reasons I'm in automotive school now. Thanks for the inspiration and videos. I hope I get a chance to meet you one day. Thank you very much for that, Carlos. I love comments like that. I really do, and I'm very humbled by that. And I wish you all the best in your career going forward. To answer your question, very good calling it a splash guard and not a backing plate, because it is not a backing plate. You're absolutely correct on that. As far as replacing it, you don't have to remove the knuckle, but you do have to take the wheel bearing and everything out in order to get to it. And the hub, which on something old and rusty, and it sounds like you're dealing with a lot of rust there, that could be a chore. So you're probably going to have to buy a wheel bearing and everything else to quote-unquote replace it properly. Now I'm going to suggest something, and this sort of goes against things that I've said in the past. Let's face it, it's a 15-year-old car. It's very rusty. Personally, I'd probably cut that splash shield off of there and not care, or just leave it. Either way. It's not that it does not perform a function, because it does keep debris from getting in the brake assembly. However, disc brakes are by design self-cleaning, so they shouldn't really succumb to a lot of issues with moisture or anything like that. The splash shield does help keep that stuff away. But if you're in school and you're industrious and you want to do that, be prepared for a fight with something that old and rusty. And as I said, also there's going to be some screws. I believe it's held down by 3 or 4 Phillips head screws that screw the assembly to the actual knuckle. Another option you might consider is maybe head to the salvage yard. See if they've got an entire knuckle assembly that has a good splash shield on it. And that would have the wheel bearing, the hub, and everything all intact. You could just remove that assembly and just swap the whole thing out. I know it seems like that might be a lot of work, but it might cover all the bases since you'd already have to replace a wheel bearing anyway. So that might be an option you might consider. Just go to the salvage yard, get a whole new knuckle, and throw it on there. And hey, if the other side is in equally bad shape, perhaps do the same to both sides. Save the rotors. You'll have an extra set of brakes around. There may be a lot of pluses to doing that if you are going to remain concerned about that splash shield. But once again, good luck in school and good luck with your career. Jay Terrific, I see you a lot in here and asking these questions, so thanks for being a regular on the show. Eric, what is the right way to depressurize a fuel system so that the fuel filter or pressure regulator can be replaced? 2005 Cavalier has a Schrader valve on the fuel rail. That actually is a really good question, and that's and as far as a right way, I'm going to admit to doing it the wrong way for several years, and I just crack things loose and let fuel spray out. However, I'm wearing safety glasses when I do this. Not really a really good excuse, but flat rate technicians, people who do this every day, work a little bit different than say a DIYer. That being said, I would say probably the best way to depressurize it, and as far as whether or not this is the right way, I can't really say, but this is what I would consider probably the safest thing to do, is pull the fuel pump fuse and crank the engine over for at least 10 seconds. Or if it starts up, great, let it start up and run till it dies. That should bleed off any existing fuel pressure you have in the system, and doing it quote-unquote safely. The thing of it is if it doesn't fire up and that fuel gets into the cylinder, it might flood it out. So there's that remote possibility. But I would think that if you have a good running engine, when you turn the key like that without the fuel pump fuse in, fuel pump obviously won't energize, and you'll just basically bleed off the rest of the pressure that's there if it starts at all. And that would be a really quick and dirty way to do it. As far as a Schrader valve, I don't even think that would come involved, because you would just be sitting there depressing the Schrader valve, spraying fuel everywhere. And if the engine is hot, that's not going to be good at all, because that fuel could ignite, or the vapors of that fuel could ignite. So that could be an issue. I hope that answers your question. Moving on, we have David Blazik. David Blazik. I apologize for messing up your name if that's the case. Hi, Eric. I have a 2002 Civic EX that at times will not accelerate when the gas pedal is pressed. The motor doesn't rev up either, and it will act as if the car is about to stall out. It seems to usually only happen when the motor is not warmed up to temp. I've replaced the fuel filter and crank sensor with no luck in solving the issue. I know I shouldn't be throwing parts at it, so I was wondering what your thoughts were. Stay dirty. Well, David, yeah, throwing parts at it is not a good idea. But if you have, like, say, a check engine light or something like that, that's a good place to start. You didn't mention whether or not you had something like that, because usually when it's a computer control component that's causing a performance issue like this, it will usually set a check engine light of some sort and give you some code to give you some direction. So it says, hey, I'm not running right. If anything, it might give you a misfire code, and it might be for a particular cylinder, although misfire codes are notoriously bad as far as nailing down a particular cylinder, at least in my experience. So I always defer to testing them all. Performance issues, there's many things that come into this. In fact, I've written an article on several of the things that could possibly cause issues. On that particular vehicle, I would kind of stay away from the TPS. It's not a common problem on there unless somebody has messed with it. The fact that it doesn't happen, and well, it does happen, it seems, when it's cold, could be an issue with, like, say, a coolant temperature sensor not functioning properly, or maybe there. Honestly, it's hard to say, because there really are so many variables. Of course, check the basics. Check, like, your tune-up items, like your spark plugs, that kind of thing. And fuel filter, that wasn't a bad thing to do, but actually I believe on the 2002 it might not even require replacement, because I think somewhere around there they started installing lifetime fuel filters for whatever that's worth. But in my experience, Hondas rarely have fuel delivery issues. That meaning that they rarely have fuel pumps that go bad, and they rarely have fuel injectors that go bad. So that's not the first place I normally go with a Honda. Normally the first place I go is toward the ignition system. And that would be a good place to check out. You might try a power balance test. I'll post a link in the description to my performance diagnosis article that I wrote that also contains some videos with some of that testing, including the power balance test that I mentioned. And you just basically got to go through the basics. And number one on that list would be, if you have a check engine light on, pull those codes, find out what those codes are, and pursue that. Pursue that as part of your diagnosis, because that's going to be your most important clue as to what might be happening there. Or if anything else, it could tell you that, okay, I'm having a misfire issue, or maybe it's got a code for a TPS being out of range. Maybe somebody went in there and messed with it when they weren't supposed to. It's really difficult to say. Or an idle air control valve that's stuck open. As I said, many variables could come into play with that. So it's really, that's kind of a tricky one to say one way or another. Okay, we have Mark Ryle Kuchar. I hope I said that correctly. 99 Chevrolet Suburban LT that has a puzzling electrical issue. The daytime running lights work intermittently, and when the system acts up, you can actually hear a relay clicking on and off, and the green light on the dashboard for the DRLs do the same thing, turning on and off. Some people who are in front of me find this very annoying. As a side note, the light on the headlight switch is always on. Could this have anything to do with daytime running lights not working right? Thanks for your time, Eric. Actually, Mark, I think you might be onto something there. It's actually kind of a common issue in General Motors with their headlight switches. In fact, that was going to be one of the first place I went with this. So given your description of this problem, I hate to tell people to throw parts at things, but I think there's a very high probability you have a problem with that headlight switch causing this issue. I would also check fuses. Another thing I believe on that is daytime running lights are disabled when you depress the parking brake, if I'm not mistaken. So if that's loose and flopping around, that could also cause that issue. So like I said, if the parking brake's depressed, the DRLs go off. I believe that's the way the system is set up. So if you have that issue, you might also check to see if your parking brake lever is loose and flopping around, or perhaps the switch that's on it might also be having an issue. But in your case, first place I would look is toward that headlight switch, because I think that's a common issue with that vehicle. All right, February. Hey, I can pronounce that one. Hey, Eric, I have a 2005 Honda Accord V6 with 107,000 miles on it. It has a strange continuous noise from 2300 to 2600 RPM, usually under load, like going up a slight hill and accelerating from a stop. The noise is like a green grasshopper chirping, not a squeak. The noise usually happens when the engine is fully warmed up, about 30+ minutes. Sometimes it's quite audible, even when the engine is hot. Sometimes it's almost gone, either with the engine hot or cold. It kind of sounds like valve train, but I can't tell without a stethoscope. This one also has a common issue on a lot of Hondas, and I believe where I would tell you to look is toward the shielding on the exhaust. So there's your exhaust pipes, and then there's shielding around the outside of it. In particular, look at the catalytic converter. I've actually got a video about how to address this problem, and what I do if I find a loose heat shield on the exhaust is I usually just wrap a hose clamp around the outside of the offending part and hold it in place. That way I still keep my heat shield, and also it stops making noise because it's held fast at that point. So in your case, really common problem with Hondas, and actually a lot of Japanese makes with those heat shields seem to have that issue. Nissans are another one I can think of, usually up by the flex pipe underneath the engine. There's part of the shielding around the outside of the mesh for a flex pipe that will come loose and cause an intermittent weird rattle. It'll just happen out of the blue sometimes. But the RPM range that you're talking about is very indicative of a heat shield problem, and also your description of that noise. So that's where I'd be looking for that. And I'll post a link in the description to that video about fixing that with simply a hose clamp. Mohammed Kadir, I hope I said that correctly. Hey Eric, would you recommend switching over to full synthetic oil after using dyno oil at 125,000 miles? I have a 2000 Honda Accord SE and have always done regular oil changes around 3K 3-month intervals. Do I need to be concerned about leaks around the seals? Thanks. Fantastic question, and another one that is going to be answered in an upcoming video. That when I went and visited my friends at Valvoline, I made a video of that interview. We addressed many of the questions that I had a forum thread for you to ask your automotive question or your oil questions to the oil experts. So I do have an answer for you here, and the answer that they said, instead of synthetic, well, it is a synthetic, I would switch to a high mileage oil. And the reason I say that, and the high mileage oils are for the most part synthetics as far as I know. The way they're formulated is specifically with seal conditioners in mind. And in synthetics, many synthetics have seal conditioners in them anyway, but more especially in the high mileage oils. So if you wanted to do a switch and you were concerned about your seals and things, and it sounds like you don't have any leaks and you've been taking care of it all this time, try a high mileage oil and see what your results are with that. But that's what they said. And as far as when to switch to a high mileage oil, those of you that are just following along and might want to, sort of a benchmark as far as when might be a good idea to do that, their statement was around 75,000 miles. So if you've got a vehicle around 75,000 miles, you're concerned about seal leakage, you're concerned about, running an older engine like that, and you want to do right by it, try some high mileage oil. It's a newer formulation beyond synthetic, if you will. that's specifically formulated for high mileage engines. So give that a try. Great question, by the way. It really sort of led into something. And like I said, I'm still working on the edit of that video. In fact, I was doing a little bit of it today. I hope to have that out to you in the not too distant future. But moving on, we have Peter Berkowitz. Hey, I have a 2008 Pontiac G5 with a loose feeling steering wheel when I'm parked and I turn the wheel left to right. At the end of the turn, I hear a small clunk or thud. I believe it's intermediate shaft. What are your thoughts, Peter? Love the show. Thank you, Peter. As far as what that might be, there's a number of things it could be, and really what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get down in there and get a look at stuff. I suspect you're looking for something that's loose. Could be an outer tie rod end, could be an inner tie rod end, it could be the steering rack itself. And honestly, I'm sort of leaning in that direction based on your description right now. So if you check the front end and you don't find any loose parts in that front end, that would be my prime suspect, is the actual power steering rack itself. The way a power steering rack works, I have my pen here to help illustrate. Your steering wheel is connected to, like, say, the top of this pen. And then through a series of linkage and things like that, it basically goes down to the power steering rack or steering gear, depending upon where you're from. And inside that power steering rack, there is exactly what the name says. It's a rack and pinion setup. So at the end of that shaft, there's a gear. And then inside the rack, inside the power steering rack, there is a rack with a bunch of teeth on it, another gear. So it's like a long bar with a bunch of teeth on it that mesh with the gear in the from the steering shaft itself. So when you turn the wheel, the steering wheel, one side to the other, that rack moves along with that gear. Now, say for instance the clearance at this gear sort of gets worn out, or maybe part of this gear gets worn out, or maybe part of the rack gets worn out, or the clearance between these two things isn't quite right. It will cause sort of a really strange steering response, a really weird feel to your steering wheel. I'm not saying that's what your problem is, but that's a prime suspect in my opinion. But first, eliminate the other possibilities of loose suspension parts, your ball joints, your tie rod ends, like I mentioned, that type of thing. I'm trying to think of what else could come to play. Loose wheel, I've seen that. So don't overlook the obvious of, like, say, if you've got a wheel that the lug nuts aren't completely fastened down, that could also cause an issue like this. Believe it or not, you can drive down the road and you don't really notice, because as you drive, centrifugal force sort of keeps the wheel in place until it takes off. Yeah, which wouldn't be a good thing. But I have a video on checking for suspension noises that goes over just general, like how to grab the wheel from, like at 3 and 9 o'clock and 12 and 6 o'clock and sort of shake it up and down and see if you've got any free play or movement there. And that usually helps you identify the location of loose parts if that's what you're dealing with. So good luck with that. All right, we have Kearney Garnett. Eric, I have a problem with the ABS and brake light is on, so the airbag light. So is the airbag light. I have an inspection due in a couple. I need these ASAP, and it is my 2001 Pontiac Subdue 2.2 liter. The connectors ain't under the seat, and I have the money to pay someone else to do it. Please help out. Okay, well, I would say that the brake light and the ABS light may be related. And anytime there's an issue with the base braking system and the brake light is on, many times the ABS light will also come on in addition to that, because the ABS system also looks at the base braking system for problems. So if the brake light comes on, then it'll trip an ABS light. The things that normally turn on the brake light are the either the fluid level being low in the master cylinder, there's a switch that does that, or the parking brake. So either one of those things can activate that red brake light. So the first thing I would do in your case is I would check the brake fluid level. And if it's low, the next step that I would take is check your front brakes, because the reason why brake fluid gets low is because as the brake pads, particularly in the front wear, it displaces the caliper piston. So more fluid is housed behind the caliper piston as the brake pads wear. So the brake fluid inside the master cylinder will get lower and lower as it fills up the calipers as the brake pads wear. Once it gets to a certain point where it's low enough, that brake light is designed to come on and say, hey, take a look at the brakes. Now, topping off the brake fluid, if you have low brake fluid, not always a good idea. You need to know where that fluid went. It's a closed system. It's not like oil that it burns off or something like that. So there's either a leak or, as I said, it's displaced because of worn pads. So if you do have low brake fluid, look for worn pads or look for leaks. That's the other thing. So if you have a leak someplace, you need to address that leak because that's where your brake fluid is going. So that may solve that problem. Now, the ABS or the airbag light, that's something probably it's unrelated. It's something different. It's another system. But with both of those codes, you need to pull the codes. You need to find some scan tool that's capable of doing that. A lot of people have talked about using the Torque app. If you're low on funds or whatever, there's find yourself some way to interface with the data link connector inside the vehicle. Maybe get that app. Maybe use that to find out what those codes are. There are other products on the market. I've done other reviews on scan tools that are capable of pulling those codes. So you might want to check those out. So there are options there, but you need to start with those codes to find out what they tell you about what the computer perceives the problem to be. Is how you got to go about it. So there's, you kind of got to start with that. But as far as the brakes, I would check those things that I mentioned as far as the brake fluid level and also your brake pads if it's low. Want to move on, get to more stuff. Sebastian Burgos. Hey Eric, I recently bought a Honda Pilot 2004 and has a rough idle recently when I full throttle the engine light comes on and the VTM4 light also came on. The same idle problem was more noticeable, 3 misfire or explosions. We checked the codes and there were 4 codes for 4-cylinder misfire. I don't know what else to do. Already bought spark plugs, new coil pack, and thought it was bad. Engine is apparently burning okay. I'm about to go back to distributor Hondas. I miss my 97 Accord. Thank you. Have a nice day. Okay, so it sounds like you've got a misfire. I don't know what the other codes were. You didn't list what the codes were. It sounds like you had, at least in those codes, maybe a general misfire, maybe a cylinder number 4 misfire, P0304, and you replaced the plugs. Replacing the plugs was not a bad thing, but I hope you used NGK or Nippon Denso plugs because Hondas are very particular about the spark plugs you use. I know they're more expensive, but honestly, they don't have to be changed often. But the correct plugs, not just in Hondas, in most vehicles these days, I would stick with the plugs the manufacturer recommends for them because they're very particular about that type of thing. That being said, with a misfire like that, the first thing I would do is a power balance test. I've got a video on this, and basically what you do is you disable each cylinder individually. Luckily, because you don't have a distributor, you won't get your butt shocked doing this. All you need to do is unplug each one of the coil packs individually as the engine is running, and you're looking for an RPM drop. You're looking for the engine to start to stumble because it's 1/6 down on power. It's being a 6-cylinder. So, yeah, it's a Pilot. Okay, so yeah, it is a 6-cylinder. So that's what you're looking for. So you're looking when you disable that coil pack, when you unplug it, it should start to run really rough. If nothing happens, you unplug that coil, and then nothing happens and the engine just keeps going on just like it is, maybe continuing to run rough, that's the offending cylinder. And do that for all the cylinders to make sure you don't have more than one, but then you've got it narrowed down. What I would do at that point is I would swap coil packs once you find that offending cylinder. As I was saying earlier, misfire codes are not very accurate as far as picking out a particular cylinder sometimes. So you may be the cylinder next door or another one in the firing order or something like that it's picking up and perceiving as that number 4 cylinder. And the reason I say that is because Hondas, as I said before, don't usually have fuel delivery problems. So it's not often they have fuel injector problems. It's often that they have ignition system problems. And part of that is because a lot of people install, non-OE quality parts on the ignition system. So I run into that a lot. So I would start with the power balance test. I'm also going to have a link in the description to my performance diagnosis article, which contains other videos, including the one on the power balance test. But we'll get that for you. We have time for one more. All right. Let's see if we can catch somebody who might have just posted. We have Dimitri R. I have a 2002 Acura TL with shuddering vibration problem under steady acceleration around 2200 RPM. My friend has a Honda Accord with the same problem, except worse. It's intermittent and there is no check engine light, even does it on the freeway. In 5th gear now, 2002 Acura TL. Actually, that car you're smack in the middle of where they had super transmission problems. I was putting in 2, sometimes 3 of those transmissions a day. It may have nothing to do with the engine. It may have something to do with the transmission, because let's put it this way, if you haven't had a transmission in that car, you're going to need a transmission in that car. And even after you put a replacement transmission in that car, you may need another one a few thousand miles later. I kid you not. So with that, with a shuttering on acceleration, that's what I would do. Also, cannot stress enough how important it is to use Honda ATF and Honda transmissions. Use Dextron or some other fluid in there, and it usually invites problems, a lot of times with shifting problems. But given that that's a 2002, and from 99 to 03, Acura Honda transmissions for the V6s were garbage. So that's just, unfortunately, what you may be dealing with there. So yeah, sorry about that. All right, it looks like we are officially out of time, and I did my best to cover as many of these questions as I could. One last thing I wanted to mention was my shirt that I forgot to talk about at the beginning. My friends at EricTheCarGuy sent this to me. It's kind of got a cool back on there and everything else, but thank you, EricTheCarGuy, for sending me that. I'll put a link in the description if you find this cool. Just a little tip though, if you do want one of these nice shirts, I would suggest you order like bigger size than you think, because they seem to run a bit small. I mean, mine just fits. I just need to lose a little bit around my middle. But anyway, hey, thank you for posting your questions, and thank you for watching. I really enjoyed interacting with you, and honestly, I prefer to answer questions this way. But when I'm not answering questions this way, head over to EricTheCarGuy.com, as I said earlier in the program. 24/7, 365, it's there as a resource to help you with your automotive issues. I've designed the entire thing around answering questions similar to what I did here. Once again, questions that are posted to the YouTube video, I will not be answering. Questions posted to this Google Plus event, now that this is over, will also not be answered. However, the next show will be, once again, July 16th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's see. Oh, yes, and of course, please check the description for links to things that were discussed here, videos, articles. I usually try to stuff that full of useful information for you so that you can have them. And the rest of these things are for me, so I believe I covered it all. Anyway, once again, thank you for watching. And oh yeah, if you wish to connect with me socially, I can be found on Google+, Facebook, and Twitter. And I close each of my videos with be safe, have fun, and of course, stay dirty. And we'll see you next time. I'm going to click the button now, clicking it.